If you please stand and face the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We want to thank all of you for coming tonight. We, the board, recognize the value of public commentary and truly appreciate all of your questions, thoughts, and concerns. If you wish to speak tonight, you will have up to 3 minutes to do so. We expect personal decorum and factual information from the speaker. The President reserves the right to interrupt the speaker when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or if it interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting. If the public comment reflects inaccurate or incomplete information, the superintendent may clarify the facts. Do we have anyone signed up to speak?
We do. Right now we have 2 names, Dan Norris first, and then Bethany Norwalt.
Mr. Norris?
3 minutes. I may have to send you an email. My name is Dan Norris. I'm the guidance counselor at Test Middle School. This is my 32nd year, and so I have a couple insights into 2 aspects of the master plan. The first is middle school transition. I was part of the planning for 2 years as we prepared for middle school to add the 6th grade, which we did, and parents were just as concerned about 6th graders coming to middle school, and it worked out great. And for 18 years, 6th graders were a part of the middle school. When the 6th grade was left back to the elementary school, my own little personal protest to the revolving door was to go back to the classroom, so I went to Garrison and convinced the principal with my other teaching partner that we wanted to loop. And so we did, but we looped to our strength. And we were veteran middle school math and science teachers, and so we looped 5th and 6th graders through math and science while the more competent reading teacher, literature, etc., taught the reading aspect of it. And that worked out just as well. Currently, I'm back at Test as the guidance counselor, and we have at Test 455 students in several exemplary programs. Last year, 100% of our algebra students in the 8th grade took the ECA and passed it. We also have a silent reading program that serves all 455 students with a library with exceptional collection of books specifically for the adolescent age group. All the research shows that 6 through 8, 5 through 8 configurations are excellent. I can assure parents that the preparation that we'll do to welcome those students will be worthwhile, and their students will rise to the occasion because they always have, and I think they'll find that they like that. My biggest concern with the addition of 300 more students into a building that was renovated for our current configuration has to do with infrastructure. Right now we have quality instruction and a viable curriculum, and we want to maintain that. Our classrooms are outfitted with Mobies, which is a ceiling projection model. We also use clickers, computers, to keep our kids interested in the activities that they do. With the addition of 300 students, we will have at least 5 to 7 traveling teachers going to a different classroom each period. I'm not sure what the data wall would look like since they don't have a room. The use of their own computers, preparation time for any teacher with the addition of 300 students. Secondly, we have a library that's full of books. We're going to need more for 5th and 6th grade, and our community space, is going to be taken up with more bookshelves for books. We need not only a full-time librarian, but I would recommend an additional half-time or another second librarian. If the Supreme Court says a corporation is people, our infrastructure is people too. Lunchtime, we feed 250 students each lunch sitting, which is 2 lunches. We use our administrators and myself as part of the lunch crew, and wouldn't you know, just this week we've had 2 absences and we've had to fill in. And so if we weren't there, there would be no supervision in our lunchroom. With the addition of 300 students, we're going to have at least 1 more sitting, and each one of those sittings is 30 minutes plus another 30-minute prep time for food preparation, and so you're looking at another hour of additional time there. Our support staff, we're going to need a full-time attendance clerk to manage 750 students. Additional RCS counseling staff. Centerstone's going to cut back on what they do. CIS, I'm not sure, but they're not qualified counselors. And to be able to provide effective and affective programs, we're going to need that kind of infrastructure of people. We're going to need an additional assistant principal, in my opinion. The principal now, with the new iRise teacher evaluation system, will have to evaluate every teacher every year.
Mr. Norris, your time.
My time is up. And lastly, I'll just remind you that once you've made your decision, there are going to be scads of teachers who are going to immediately have to figure out what they're going to do, and they're going to have to pack and figure out where they're going to go, and the volunteer hours alone, the monetary amount that that represents is significant. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dan.
If I ask you to jot some of your ideas down because you had a lot of ideas, could you do that?
I can.
Thank you.
Bethany Norwalt.
I'm certainly not as prepared as Mr. Norris, and I don't have 3 minutes of comments. But I do implore you to definitely reconsider closing C.R. Richardson. That's who I'm here to support. When I told my son, who is 6 years old, who's been going there from pre-K to now first grade, that the school is going to close, I had no idea. They would absolutely break down in tears and beg me not to send him to another school. And I tried to explain to him that some of your friends will be there and things of that nature, and give him all the things that you guys have been saying. But it's a support system there that he has had behavioral problems, and then now he hardly doesn't. I mean, because of all the support system there. And if you guys, even if you do close a school and they go to another school, they really need those CIS coordinators, the extra counselors, all of that to really help them through, rather than putting them in that other program that you were talking about where I guess behavioral problem kids would go to another school. Whereas in CR, when there's problem children, they actually really work to integrate everybody. I mean, there has been so much improvement, and it's just one big family, and we just really need the support of CIS, Centerstone. Couldn't do it without them. First name basis for 2 years. They're wonderful, and I just really implore you to consider, also because it's been brought up several times that, you know, it is low-income neighborhood, and that's true. I would not feel comfortable with my son riding the bus, either one of them. One has Asperger's, and my younger one is 6, and he, of course, has got behavioral problems, but we're working on them, whatever. And I would have to drive him, meaning that I would have to, you know, take my husband to work every day, come home. That's an extra $30 in my budget for gas. That's not just me, though. I know that that's a personal situation, but a lot of families are in my boat, and it's just going to have to be a lot of changes for transportation, things of that nature, and it's really going to put a stress. Sometimes you can't hardly come up with that $5 extra for a field trip, let alone $30 to $40 extra a week for gas. So just think about the families that really depend on that school and that staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone who's not signed up who would like to speak? I see a hand back there and a hand back there. So, ma'am, if you'd like to come forward. No, you're fine. Just come up and introduce yourself. And
Yes, I am Geraldine Day. I'm not good at speaking out in front of people, but the reason I am here in support of Garrison. That is the only school. I have 2 children. My daughter is 12, my son is 10, and that is the only school that they have ever attended. And it's a wonderful school. Mm-hmm. Very good school. They brought my son a very long way in his education. It's the best school to me. it's wonderful. They have, everybody there is just so, you always feel welcome there. And it's really dragged my kids down, and me as well. And I would just like, if there's any way to please take into consideration of closing that school.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And I saw a hand in the back. Sort of a familiar face. I think you've been up here before.
Hi, I'm Electa Burke, and no, I don't have any students in the Richmond schools, but I've been reading the information, reading about the changes that you're looking at, looking at what you're having to do to consider the changes, understanding what the things have to be addressed, and how every student can be given its potential and opportunity to reach its potential within the school system. It is hard. It is hard to make some of these decisions, and I realize that, and everybody can, I hope, see that these are hard decisions. The one thing that I was concerned about, and that was ignoring the health of the students, and the comment made in regards to that the health clinic, that the projection for that with the grant that was given by the government, that would not be available because of the changes with the schools. And I would like for all of you to get out of your comfort zones and see the invisible people that are out there. I see them. I work with some of these people, and saying that there's a duplication of services for health for students, and that the Wayne County Health Department does this is not a reality when there are people without insurance, without Medicaid, and without access to medical care. And I know it's just a little cog within the system and all, but when you take a look at the whole students, you have to take a look at the health too. And I just feel very adamant about this, and I feel that the invisible student shouldn't be ignored. And I know you heard about the student that had the strep throat, and I can see into the future, and 30 years from now, that student that had the strep throat that didn't get the care now has to have valve replacement surgery, because that's what can happen with strep. So it's something that I know you have to take a hard look at, but if there's any way that we can work with getting that grant put together and having that clinic for the students, I think it'd be something very beneficial for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burke. Anyone else like to speak over here? You could introduce yourself, please.
My name is Starletta Phoenix, and I have a daughter that goes to Highland. My question, or not my question, it is a good school, and I'm sure all the schools are that you're proceeding to do this, but we purposely moved where we moved so my daughter would go to a country school. And to me, I had good relationships with my teachers, and the reason being is because I think I stayed in that school. I started a school and I stayed there till I finished, moved on. Matter of fact, I see one of my old teachers here today.
One of your former teachers.
I didn't mean that physically old. That's a big concern with us, because we are, I mean, you know, I know that a lot is on everybody's plate, and I know that they're trying to do everything they can, and not everybody is going to be happy. But I'm very concerned because Highland teachers, they have such a bond with their students, and I'm sure it's like that with other. I'm not trying to downgrade any other school, but they are so one-on-one with these kids, and I think that's very, very important, especially with the less structure that they have nowadays. It takes two parents to work to provide a decent living anymore, and my concern is the way it is now with us is I can get my child on the bus and I can be at work on time because of the hours that Highlands, I think they're school starts at 7:30, I'm not sure, which they pick her up before 7. I have to be at work at 8. I am concerned about that because right now I don't have to have daycare in the morning. I do have to have it in the afternoon, which is fine. Most parents will. I have to have that. The teachers work real hard with them, and you know, I don't want this to just like be thrown in. I think everybody, if you're going to make that decision, but let every parent know with a heads up so we can make other arrangements. I would like for everybody to take into consideration, yes, I'm here for Highland, just like some of the other people are here for other schools. I ask you not to do this. I know that's going to be a tough decision that everybody's going to have to make, but in concerns, I think you need to look at everything all the way around. These kids, this move, you know, that should be the number one thing to make sure that they take the move comfortably so it's not devastating to them. I don't like the idea of putting anybody out of work, by no means. I know what that's like. And I feel very sorry for the teachers that are going to lose their jobs. And I hope that they can find something soon. But I ask you again, please do not close Highland. Thank you.
Very much, Mrs. Venus. Anyone else like to speak? Sir? Hi.
My name is Jay Barbary, and I have children in Richmond schools. I've paid attention to the discussions that have gone on regarding the master reorganization, et cetera. And listening to what the teachers have said, what Mr. Norris has said regarding planning for these transitions, you all are faced with a very difficult decision to make, and I understand that. I would just ask you to, when you make it deliberately, but do not make it too quickly. I realize that sometimes when decisions are made, if they're rushed, that can be convenient, but in hindsight, there are often things you wish you could undo. And so that would be my request as a member of the community and as a school parent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Other parents? Sir?
Get up here. Amy.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Byron Wadsworth. I want to talk about class size. My son for the past few years is averaging 15 to 20 in his class and has done awesome. But I'm noticing now that there's 31 in his class, it's going downhill. He was a second grader, now he's a third grader. My biggest concern is just class size.
Okay.
I'm really worried about that.
Yeah.
Mine too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did anyone else want to speak? I can see you sitting there just wanting to jump up.
Hi, my name is Amy Urick. I have been with Richmond Community Schools for 16 years now. I am an early childhood special educator at the Early Learning Center. I have been there for 7 years, as long as the program has been in place. When we began looking at, when I first started working in the field, we were spread out in the community. And we realized that it would be wonderful to have our own site where all 3 to 5-year-olds could be in one place. They could have their own school, feel as they are part of the community in their own way. We have been very successful the last 7 years. We are on board with all of what Richmond Community Schools has asked us to do, such as the positive behavior support is in place, the RTI is in place. We also have purchased the curriculum that the elementary schools are also have adopted, so we are implementing that curriculum as we started back in January. I have 2 of my own children who have both been through the program and have had a very successful transition into the elementary levels. Many of my families have come to me and have expressed that they would not know what to do if they didn't have our program and the support staff that we have on our site. Right now we have 4 general education preschool classrooms and 2 special needs classrooms. We also have all of our therapists on site, the OT, the PT, the speech therapist. We have a social worker that is in our building. So when families come in, they have a sense of belonging, a sense of that this could be a place where their child would be. My feeling is that the preschool should stay in one central location. and that would be at the Early Learning Center. The building is set up to meet preschoolers' needs. Our facility has a gym where the children can use it on a daily basis, and at that age, play and gross motor skills are extremely important for their brains to develop. A preschool classroom in each elementary building would lose its uniqueness, and being a program to service all children, I feel like it needs to be in one central place. We've been in the communities, we've been in other buildings, and it just doesn't seem to be as unified as what one center can offer a child and their family. To lose this program, I feel, would not only be a disservice to the children, but also to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Sir?
My name's Paul Croucher, and I just wanted to share a story with you. The issue here is $2.3 million in cuts that were faced. People are testifying and are talking about all the benefits from these programs. That's what's going to be cut. If all this stuff is going to be cut out, if you don't accept or make some changes here, we're not there yet. Christmas Day, I live in the Elizabeth Starr Academy. 3 kids come up, knocked on my door, and needed water. They filled up their jugs. I later found out they didn't have heat. We're not there. You could say, and all of it could say, well, the Salvation Army's out there to help them kids, Toys for Tots, and there's all kinds of services available. And this should have never happened to this little first grader. When I asked her, Santa come and see you, she says, no. You know, I broke out a baby doll and gave it to her from one of my great nieces. But we're not there, and we can easily blame the parent, which it probably is the parent's fault in this case, but we can't blame the child. We need services in place to help these children, and we're not there. And that's what we're trying to do here, I think, is consolidating these schools. We're trying to help all of our children, and I think that's our focus. It's just to help each and every one of them. And we are growing now with the services in place. ISTEP scores went up 11%. I could give you a lot of positive testimonies from community and school coordinators where they're touching people's lives and children's lives. I think that's all.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Other comments? Okay. Moving on. As the Palladium item stated this morning, tonight is the school board's turn. We've called a special work session to analyze the pieces of Dr. Borf's recommendation that was made on December 14th. While our overarching goals include the financial piece and student enhancement goals, there are many factors that need to be discussed in reaching these decisions. Grade configuration, school closures, reorganization of special programs, and the reorganization of community youth services are some of the issues that need to be taken into account. Tonight we're going to take a look at the different elements of the plan, talk about their strengths and challenges, ask questions, and voice expectations. We've prepared a chart, which you can see up here, along with several flip charts to keep us focused and to record information. So, Dr. Borf, if you'd like to begin.
Yeah, I'd also like to have the board recognize that we have over here a large version of the objectives we worked on before we even began this formal process. We'll keep that up tonight because I think it's important that we continue to come back to that. But cabinet members are prepared to work these charts so that we capture the comments of the board members as we talk about these different elements of the plan and the strengths and challenges and so on. The purpose of the evening is maybe to even answer a few questions, but more important than that, it's to get all the questions down that we need to before the cabinet, the administration, needs to help the board prepare for a decision to be made. We need to hear what your concerns are, what your questions are yet, and in the process, we might have some answers. We're not necessarily prepared to answer all questions tonight, but we are prepared to listen and to take down notes so that we can help you be better prepared.
Thank you.
So would you like for people to go up and prepare for the...
Yeah, I guess we should probably
Yeah.
start with grade configurations and talk about the strengths and the challenges. And I can't even read those signs down
Well,
there.
Kathy Parker is at the grade configuration.
Okay. Would someone like to start? This is going to be an informal conversation, so, you know, you can just jump in there. It might look kind of messy, but that's the way conversations go when you're talking about a lot of different things. So if someone wants to start off the conversation, and we'll go from there.
Why don't we begin by saying the grade configuration would be pre-K through 4 at the 6 buildings, grades 5 through 8 at the intermediate buildings, and 9 through 12 at the high school.
Could you speak to the 5 through 8 and outline what that might look like?
Sure. It's a departure from what we have right now, and the reason we have moved away from saying middle schools is that the 5-8 that we're talking about is a whole different organization from the middle school organization, and that's why we're calling this an intermediate building. Grades 5 and 6 would be in those buildings operating much as they do as elementary classrooms today. We call these self-contained classrooms, and by the term self-contained, what we mean is that for the most part of the day, that's where the student will be working with a teacher. That's an elementary model. And those grades 5 and 6 would be in those buildings currently known as middle schools, but they'd be operating as an elementary classroom. In the 5th grade, at the end of the 5th grade year, those students would move on with their teachers into the 6th grade. We call that looping because the 6th grade teachers at the end of next year would fall back down to the 5th grade, and they would then loop the next year, begin looping with their students. So the students would be, as much as we can guarantee that, and there is no guarantee that the teachers would remain the same, but as much as we can guarantee, students would remain with their teachers for 2 years in those grades 5 and 6. Now, when they move on to the 7th grade, it would look very much like the operation that we have today. That's a departmentalized approach, and by that we mean the English department, the math department, social studies department, so on, teach the specific courses. So you have almost 2 different operations happening within one building. That's the intermediate design that we're talking about as opposed to a middle school or a junior high concept.
Following up that question, I've heard a number of people say, well, you just moved the 6th graders back to elementary and now you're moving them back. We ought to talk a little bit about why we made the first decision was made because I-STEP was in the fall. We had a brand new group of 6th graders moving to middle school, and at that time it was only 6th graders who 3rd, 6th, and 8th graders who took I-STEP, and that was a high-stakes test. They got to middle school, which was a huge transition for them. Bang, in 2 weeks they had to take I-STEP, and we thought that would be better back at the elementary, and it did work at that time. But then, as folks have mentioned, what happened to the 7th and 8th graders? So one of the strengths, I think, of this configuration is no longer do 7th graders come in and they're begin to be 7th graders, and then bang, the next year they have to prepare for 8th graders. We've lost what it means to be a tween. And when you look at the research for that kind of pre-adolescent adolescence, as I think Mr. Norris was alluding to, this matches where kids are better in terms of emotional and social development.
Well, I think there have also been questions that's certainly been raised in the Palladium item. Why, just a few years ago, did I back away from supporting a recommendation to move the 6th graders back into the middle school? And I'm suggesting that now. And the question is, I think a good question. The answer is, this is a totally different type of recommendation than we were looking at to begin with. We're not just moving sixth graders with this recommendation back into a middle school. We're talking about fifth and sixth graders being moved as elementary students into an intermediate setting. And if you look at that recommendation, it's very different. Back when we were looking at that a few years ago, we didn't have the capacity to do that kind of organization. That's possible now because we're talking about moving some classes that exist in those buildings out to make room for that. So it's a very different design. There have been questions posed to us: what research is out there that supports this? Well, the research says it's good teaching and it's good curriculum that is linked to student achievement, not grade configuration. Grade configuration tends to be a result of needs in those districts as they are. You'll find some districts that are 7-8, you'll find 6-7-8, you'll see 5-7-8, you'll see K through 8. There are different designs in different buildings, and the research says, again, it's the good teaching and the good curriculum that makes the difference.
I know you've answered this before, but I'm going to ask it again publicly. Have you looked at other school systems with that configuration?
We have. One of the questions, and it came out of Dennis Middle School, a conversation I was having with the whole faculty at Dennis Middle School. Their concern was, we have been so fixed on the sixth grade test scores, but what did we do to the rest of the school? So when we came away from that conversation, Dr. Parker and I talked about this, and I asked her if she would work to isolate the test scores of 7th and 8th graders in the whole state of Indiana and look at those test scores by looking at grades or at schools that had 6, 7, 8 and grades and schools that had 7, 8 configurations. We've also looked at 5, 6, 7, and 8. And in those situations, we found that the I-STEP scores in language arts and in math were higher for 7th graders who were in 6, 7, and 8 and 5, 6, 7, and 8. Schools that had gone just to 7 and 8, like we had done, we found that the test scores were lower, and that was in 1 year, one I-STEP year, but that's what we found.
One other thing, Mr. Norris brought up several good points. So when you're doing your planning, how are you going to cover all that? Are you going to work with the counselors at the middle schools, or?
Well, as a matter of fact, once the decision is made, we have a lot of work to do. But some of that work will be with the teachers, with the principals, with the parents. Depends on with the students. It depends on those particular issues. For example, even tonight, before this meeting, we had a meeting with the Richmond Education Association. And in that meeting, we talked about how transfers will be processed with the staff. We have a draft. It's a very rough draft of what we would like to do. We talked about that.
You're talking about transfers for adults, not students.
Adults and the teachers. And we asked them to join us in drafting that from this point on. While we don't have any decisions made, we think it's probably a good thing to begin talking about that with the teachers. There are many conversations just like that will have to be done on staffing needs, curriculum needs, equipment needs at the various buildings.
Dixie.
Well, while we're on this, we did have some parents raise the question, too, about K through 8, larger school districts moving to K through 8, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Kansas City, there were several. And I think our problem is we don't have the buildings without spending exorbitant amounts of money to make K through 8s.
We have to live within our means.
Right.
And we have pledged to do that.
Yeah, because every grade level needs different.
But there were questions about that.
Right.
So I wanted
Thank you.
Linda? Does somebody else, because I've already.
Well, going back to the grade level configurations, it has been difficult to find research that promotes one grade configuration over another, because it does come. What I've read has come back to say that it is the teacher in the classroom that makes the difference. I've read a lot of articles where now they're suggesting that we don't go K through 8. They're saying, well, maybe we've made the move too quick, and some of these organizations are starting to break away from K through 8. But I guess one of the questions that I have is kind of even bigger than that. And I don't know whether we should, once I ask this question, whether we wait till maybe cover it if it's better in another area. But what if we had less enrollment or greater enrollment? Would we look at changing the grade configurations again? I mean, are we looking at having
future
3 or 4 district-wide K through 8s, or 3 pre-K through 4s and 2 whatever? I mean, because if grade configuration, changing the grade configuration doesn't really bother me as much as how it's going to impact the child in the classroom. So if our teaching is going to be what reduces any transition problem that the student has, what can we put into place with the staff to limit those problems? I mean, will we be ready, or can we be ready to do this in the fall? Or is this something that we need longer than this fall to plan for and do it next fall? That's where I'm more concerned with, is are we going to be ready to do what we have to do to ensure that our staff is ready in the fall to accept this grade level configuration? Because what I kind of hear is, from a program point of view, the change that we're going to have essentially is the 5th and 6th graders move into another location. We're still going to have an elementary setting as far as the 5th and 6th grade goes, and we're still going to have a high school setting with the change of class periods every day kind of thing with the 7th and 8th. So philosophy-wise and program-wise, it's really 2 separate programs in one building that I can see later merging into having some other benefits, students that are ready to take higher level classes and those types of things. More availability for science classes and music programs. I mean, I could see there's some benefits there. So I just want to make sure that we're ready. We can be ready to be effective at this fall.
Linda?
Well, first of all, after Dan's remarks and talking to several people, I guess I want to ask the question, do we have enough space? Are we sure that we have enough space to do what we need to do with our students? And so that's one of my questions. Another question is, have we thought about, I've heard you say that our kindergarten class this year is larger than most of our kindergarten classes. So are we going to be able to house them in 5 years at our intermediate schools? So that's a look to, I guess, the future. Kind of long-range planning also. So those are 2 biggies for me, and also for the entire grade level configuration, I guess I want to know, how is this going to improve performance? Well, that's what we're all about, increasing student achievement. So how is that going to?
Pat, and then Dixie.
Well, while we're on 5 through 8, several parents voiced concerns about safety with 5 through 8. So I think that's something else that we need to talk about, explain what processes or what things do we have in place to ensure safety at our intermediate.
And one of the flip of that, part of what I wanted was the safety. Some parents were saying to me, I'm glad you're getting the 5th and 6th graders out of the elementary buildings because they are so much more mature than pre-K, kindergarten, even 1st and 2nd graders. So one of the advantages of this can be seen as a disadvantage by some folks. They're saying my 5th grader is too immature, but yet when you go to an elementary, some of the 5th and 6th graders are too mature. So I think part of what I value about this is following child development chunks and pieces. This seems to fit that more than the pre-K through 6th, because that's a huge...
The preteen and adolescent
Yeah.
age group, too, is a pretty volatile bunch.
Absolutely. But people keep saying to me, how are you going to keep my 5th graders safe from the 8th grade bullies? Well, then somebody said, how are you keeping my kindergartner safe from the 6th grade, whatever. So I think that's a huge issue on people's minds that we know is there. This safety is huge. We've got to keep that up. But one of the other advantages that you kept reminding us, one of the reasons not to do the K2, 3, 4, 5, all of those, fewer transitions.
Yep.
There are fewer transitions in this, and they seem to come at the time when kids can do them better. Does that make sense? When you look at child development principles, those periods of time seem to be a better time for them to do that. So the fewer transitions. But I do think the bullying piece is huge. And I don't know whether it's here or when we get to school closure. The idea of and I appreciate your comment about the class size. One of the reasons I would even agree to close schools and move more kids to a critical mass is to prevent exactly what you said about the 31 in the class size. I think that's why we're doing some of this.
Absolutely.
So I don't know whether that fits under the grade configuration or the school closure. But my expectation is, whatever it is, that we have reasonable, the prime time class sizes that will allow and meet the gentleman's concern.
With the different grade configurations, we've heard from a lot of parents who are concerned about transportation. How are we going to deal with that?
With grade configuration or
well,
the building closures?
I guess it works in both.
Yeah, it's really part of both. Because we have not made any decision yet, we're not prepared tonight to show what redistricting looks like. But we have begun the conversation talking about what transportation needs are going to be and what transportation resources are going to be available to us to address some of the additional needs that we may have in some pockets of the district. And what we're thinking is that as we change from busing so many students out into a couple of the schools and instead have those buses available closer to the city, we're going to find, now this is just theoretic, we haven't done our modeling quite yet, but the thought is that we're going to have some additional capacity with our transportation to provide some services within the district that may not be available right now.
So actually, that's positive. Could be
Yes.
positive.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Linda?
Also, I would like to know how this is going to help our mobility issues. And I know that that also goes with closing schools, that just naturally will help the mobility issues. But that will not take care of all of the mobility issues. So I guess I want some thinking and some planning done for the mobility issues that we have.
And while we were talking about transportation, because I did hear this from parents as well, it's not just student transportation, but now that we are moving away from neighborhood schools where parents could walk to school events, parent-teacher conferences, and so forth, I think that is something that we're going to have to look at, is how to get our parents to their child's activities. And I know that probably will be additional money, but they need to be there.
that may be where we're talking about some additional transportation opportunities that wouldn't exist now, but
Right.
might in the future.
Okay.
Linda?
Also, how is this going to help us grow enrollment? That is one of our goals for our corporation goals. And so,
We can ask that about every single one of the
well,
absolutely, can't we?
It needs to be asked.
Well, that's actually kind of my question too. Is as this is very a mechanical thing. This is building capacity or using capacity in the buildings, giving us the using our resources well to be able to keep the programs that he was talking about. But I also think it's our excuse to move into create some creative things that maybe we haven't been able to do before because we were so spread out. And so I guess, and maybe this isn't a question for tonight, but I'm interested to hear how you would be encouraging that creative thought. For example, Mr. Norris talked about the looping is one thing, but looping to the teacher's strength. I could get really excited about that because looping is one thing, but if they're the science teachers are teaching science, the things that they love, and they're able to do that changes the tone for me. So, and what are we going to ask our teachers in the different buildings, what do you want, what's the character of this school going to be? What is it, what creative thing is this going to be? What theme? I don't know. I don't know the answer or what questions to ask exactly, but I'd love for the staffs in the buildings, once they're set, to come up with some ideas about growing the enrollment. What's going to make them special? Now that we have the opportunity and we're compacting, I think it's a perfect opportunity to do that.
And Linda, go ahead now.
Well,
then I'll go next.
I was just going to piggyback on that and piggyback on a comment or a question that Jeff had about the time. And I guess what I want to ask is, how are we going to empower our staff and our parents to become a part of all that is happening? I think that is huge, and we obviously need to be thinking about how to empower parents and our staff to be a part.
Well, that leads into, it's a good segue to what I am concerned about. It's a challenge and an opportunity. The grade configuration allows, I want to make sure that there is communication between the units. The high school and middle school had started, at least with English and math, and some of those, they'd started having curriculum discussions about how to push that forward. So I think the transition for kids is important, but the transitions for curriculum and subjects and teachers is as important. And so fourth and fifth graders, when they're in the same building, fourth grade teachers and fifth grade teachers, when they're in the same building, might have communication. We're going to have to make sure that we have some of that. One of the things I'm a little concerned about, I'm not sure that I'm willing to say I just want to move an elementary class for fifth and sixth graders into another building. Fifth and sixth graders need a bit of, there's got to be a gentle evolution, maybe that's from elementary to this pre-middle school to middle school to high school, and how we intentionally help kids transition from being an elementary kid to being more of a middle school tween kid. I think we have to be pretty intentional about what we do there. So not just move an elementary classroom to a middle school so-called building, but help kids understand that their role is different, their responsibility is different, their participation is different. So I don't want this to just look like we're picking up fifth and sixth graders and moving them. I want this to look like we are reorganizing for the best needs, to meet the needs of the kids at that particular age. So that's of concern.
Well, and I can appreciate that. That's why I used the term morph or blend later.
Morph or more?
Morph.
I should clean my ears out. Sorry. Morph. Okay.
Or blend, because that goes to my question of time.
Yeah.
I mean, what we create and what we have available August 14th, may be the first step in.
I would think
what?
that's true.
I mean, to go to the parents, the students, the teaching staff, the administrators, and say, we want you ready. Let's say we don't make our decision until the end of January, 1st of February. They've got 6 months to logistically get everything worked out. You know, that's after we decide the boundaries. That's after the REA works on how they're going to work on the transfers. That's after a bunch of things. That's trying to get a handle on the number of students that we have. You know, Mr. Norris said that one of the things that bothered me the most was 5 to 7 traveling teachers. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but initially that was a negative thing for me. So, we are not going to know total enrollment, possibly. It may fluctuate several students. So, how much do we want to try to accomplish and have ready for the fall? We can't get real fancy.
Yep.
But that doesn't say we can't change it the next year.
You guys use my name one more time. Do I get to talk again?
We're talking for you, Dan. I got to
Check.
Copyright infringement.
I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't have come.
That's right. Well, I appreciate Miss. I know, and I appreciate Mr. Croucher's reminding us we're here because we want to save certain services, and so we need to save some money to do that. But in the meantime, we need to make the most creative, innovative plan that we can.
Well, I think the balanced transitions that we could get out of this are much better, because I've never liked that 7-8, that in-out thing. I think that's really bad. But I think our transitions are going to have to be as strong as what we've done with our 9th graders, with the 9th grade academy. And I think that is something we're really, really going to have to work on, because it has to be comfortable. We probably need a year where teachers and students have time to build relationships, and parents, and evolve into the kind of schools and the kind of looping and the kind of things that they need to do after they see the needs of the kids that they have.
Well, and don't you think, I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that while we are reorganizing, there are going to be some very, very concrete, tangible things that remain the same. Our literacy curriculum, our math curriculum, I mean, that kind of stuff is not going to change, because that is what we have to do, right? How we deliver that and organize it is what we're thinking about, right? I don't want people to think we're just throwing everything away, correct? I mean,
well, actually, we're changing our science curriculum, aren't we? Aren't we?
Well, that's the year. Yes, this is the year.
I mean, math. So we are changing. The only one that won't change is
the literacy. Right. but I think we got to say out loud that the curriculum and the teaching is going to.
But if the teachers are empowered to do this, I trust their creativity and their ability to make things work. They've always pulled through.
You want us to go into
Aaron?
school closure?
Well, Aaron has something you'd like to say.
I'm trying to keep this as simple in my mind as I can, because the fact is we're going to be facing a $2.3 million cut at the end of this year. Something has got to be done. And the simplicity of it all in my mind is the fact that in my time on this board, I've had to be a part of closing schools, but we've never been to a point like this before. I see all the questions that are coming up here right now, and they're the same questions we've been asking for the last 7 or 8 months, and the same ideas that have been coming up the last 7 or 8 months. And until we actually make the decision to accept a proposal or to reject a proposal, we still have a fact that we're going to have to close some buildings. We're going to have to look to eliminate $2.3 million from our budget, and it's at a crossroad that we've never been before. Why I keep it simple is because I understand that as a community, and I'm talking about it as an RCS community, the greatest asset that we have are the teachers and administrators that we have. Whatever, I rest assured
as it has been in previous school closings, that they're going to come together. They're going to see the need, whether it's a 5 through 8 configuration in a grade school or a pre-K through 4 or whatever the configuration may be. The greater emphasis is going to be on the student, that they're going to place on the student. And I know that we still have a lot of questions to do, but I guess it's simple in my mind because I know that until we make the decision of what we're going to do, a lot of questions, transportation, a lot of questions about certain programs and everything else can't be answered realistically until we get to that point. I know that we don't have really a great amount of time that we have yet to make this decision before we have to get it implemented for the wheels to start rolling so we can open school in August and have everything functioning. And even when we do, if we do, and whatever the decision may be, come August, we're still going to have a lot of rusty points out there because we've never been there before. But again, I rest assured that the questions we're going to have questions next September and October and November because we've never been there before. And I know that our teachers are going to do a great job with putting the pieces together to ensure that every student is able to achieve, whether they're high ability students or students with special needs or anything else. They're going to do that. That's why I'm not asking a lot of questions, because I don't think we're at a point yet where we're going to get the total answers that I may have for you.
Linda? Yes, I wanted to, before we move on, I heard somebody say they...
But I have another question, too.
Okay, well, good. I guess I want to make sure that we are developing our programs to make them better. And so I need to ask a question about our preschool to make sure that we are developing that program and not just if we happen to have room in a building for our preschool.
But we're going to. Are we off of the 5.8 now, or?
Well, it's in no, it's in
Pre-configuration.
configuration.
Oh, okay.
Just general configuration.
5 days just been the main part of
We've
the
just kind of. I'm switching the focus, Jeff, from to where I belong.
In preschool, huh?
That's right. That's right. But so, I guess as I looked at the plan, I had concerns as to what our preschool program, what's it going to look like. Are we going to focus on 4-year-olds? Are we going to focus on 3-4-year-olds? Are we going to focus on 5 days a week or 3 and 2 days a week, and do we have room for them? Because do we have enough room? And do we know who those students are that we need to be focusing on for that preschool in our specific schools? How many classrooms do we need in order to accommodate the students that we need to be serving?
And if we believe in the philosophy of collaboration among teachers of a grade level, what have we done if we have only one preschool in a building? We have separated that. We've said preschool teachers don't need collaboration, and I would add that question to yours.
Well, yes, thank you, because it all goes along with growing our programs and making them better.
Right.
So,
and my one last question in this piece, and it may go with others as well. I want to make sure that when we assign administrators, that they are in this configuration is different than we have now, and I want to ask the question, are we putting the best administrator for that best configuration? Because there are some who do better with intermediate, some who would prefer and do better with elementary. So the placement of teachers is important, but I think the placement of appropriate administrators in those buildings and the number of administrators, depending on the number of students, I think are questions that come up to me, maybe in grade configuration, just because of appropriateness, but also then in school closure in terms of numbers of kids. So I may ask that question again, but I think the placement of appropriate and effective administrators is hugely important.
Linda?
Since Mr. Millis is writing general questions, I have a general question. I was wondering if it would be, I'm the kind of person that I need to see it other than on a piece of paper. So I was wondering if you would be willing to host a field trip for board members who might be interested to show us that, yes, indeed, there is enough space in our buildings for what is being proposed. Maybe, is anyone out?
That's an easy one.
That's a great
Yes.
idea.
That would be fun.
Yeah, we can do that.
Maybe we could videotape it so the public will know.
Yeah.
And I think Mr. Mays would be a good person to help us on that.
Well, you know, I was going to suggest that in transition, I think the last week of school, we all ought to go to everybody ought to go to their new building and where they're going to be in their new room, even though it might not quite look the same and people haven't had things to move, but so that even parents and students could have this field trip. But that's maybe school closure, so.
We'll move back to,
You're going to move back to 5.8 or?
not 5.8. It's all under grade reconfiguration, so any comment you have under that?
Well, I think educationally, curriculum-wise, I'm not, that's not my expertise. I have to depend on people who are trained for that. But I think one of the things that financially, the numbers have to be there. I mean, financial reasons is what driving it. That's the main thing that's driving what we're doing today. There are other things that are driving it as well, but I mean, financially, we all realize that it's money and services that we want to keep for our kids that's forcing this to make us more efficient. I think one of the questions, and I'd like to thank the public because, and we all have been, we've been receiving some very thoughtful and just well-worded, thoughtful comments in the last several weeks.
I agree.
I'm pleased that the tone has changed from one of that I felt like I was attacked to now I feel like they have, there are some serious concerns and they have some thoughts and I just want to say I appreciate that. And I think it's important that they realize that. But to me, one of the things that I've got to look at is financially, when it comes down to our final vote, if our goal is to collect 2.1 million or 1.7 or wherever we end up, that's one of the things that I think that we need to hold people accountable for, because we can make all of the changes that we want, but there has to be a degree of accountability. The public's going to hold us, the board members, accountable, and therefore we're going to hold the administrators accountable. With that, probably one of the biggest questions that keeps coming up to me, or concerns, is do we want to open the Hibbert building and incur another cost when the building has been closed technically twice? But so I think talking about what we want to do with the Hibbert building, why we want to reopen it, whether it's, there's any future plans beyond that, I think maybe if we do a little better job of communicating that, I think that would help us as well.
Is that something you would be prepared to answer now, or is that something you?
We can talk about the use of the Hibbert building, because I think we probably have more to say than we said at the presentation the other night, or on the 14th of December. The Hibbert building is currently being used in many ways. I mean, we are maintaining it. It's not as though every dollar we spend to reopen that building would be new dollars. We are using that right now. I mean, we're operating a pool. We're maintaining the building right now. So it's not a total new money situation. The Hibbert building, though, that whole site the Hibbard location, the football field where C.R. Richardson is, all that is an excellent opportunity for that south side. It's kind of like a south side anchor, if you will, for future planning. One of the first questions you raised as you began the conversation was, are we planning for growth? Are we planning for the ability to reduce if we need to? Well, one of the conversations that we have had since I remember coming to Richmond, Rick Ahaus was a real fan of having 4 large elementary buildings. If you broke up Richmond into fourths, put a large elementary building in each one of those quadrants. Well, that's not in this plan. Obviously, it's not in this plan. But it could very well be in the future that we would be looking at 3 large buildings. But on the south side of town, the Hibbard building it's not built in a way to be a great elementary building without some renovation. But if you were looking at that as an anchor to a larger elementary building, there could be a nice elementary building come right out of the Hibbard building itself on that upper level, and continue to use the lower level as we want with the gym, the cafeteria, and so on. It would be a whole reorganization of that site. It would probably be we would be looking at doing something else, maybe even eliminating the building that is now C.R. Richardson in that kind of a scenario. But we know from the engineers that have looked at that building that it is still a good building, very good building with a lot of nice features to it, features that we should not just be letting go. We also know that that is a nice anchor site for educational purposes on the south side of town.
Did you hear the rumor that it was a bad building? I mean, people kept saying to me, well, you closed it because it wasn't good.
And that came out of when we went to 2 middle schools, and it was assumed at some point that, because I think it was said, of the 3, that's not the one we'd renovate. If we had 3, we don't need all 3 of them, and I think it got turned into it wasn't a safe building. So
it's actually a fine building. We've been assured that it was. We made that assurance before we even renovated or remodeled the pool. Structurally, it's sound. It does need some, as Mr. Mays told me today, it needs some tender loving care. It needs some paint, and it needs some ceiling tiles from place to place, and parking. It needs some site development. But it's a great location for the future. And if we don't maintain it, if we decide not to maintain it, we stand the risk of losing that whole site. And I think that would be terrible for the planning of the future of the district. There are places, even our nice buildings, our, quote, good buildings, if you're looking down the road for some planning, this would probably be beyond some of our tenures here. You're looking at some buildings that are really rather landlocked. And that site offers some nice development opportunities.
How many acres does it have to?
So we could actually kind of consider, and I think this is good, because to me, I want to look a little bit more into the future as well.
Absolutely.
Either way.
Yeah.
So
both directions, I agree.
If our goal is, as I look at our other elementary schools, assuming that we close the 3 that's on the proposal, I'm making that assumption right now. Not saying that we should, but that's the assumption. The elementary schools that we have left, you've got some that stand out that will be what I would call a long-lasting super school because of space that's available. So, and I can be as bold to say it could be Cresdale, which Cresdale currently is already, it is in the process of having a planned renovation now.
Right. It actually has the most property of all of them, doesn't it? Which
Well, I believe it does. Has the largest
Charles
site.
does?
And then you got Charles. So I was kind of looking for but even Fairview to a degree.
Forward. You'd have to go forward.
You have the front. You don't have the back. You have the front.
You only have the front, but But then Vale is definitely landlocked.
So is Westview.
Westview. I mean, that's part of the problems. We had the overcrowding there because we didn't have the
Star.
room to build additions there. So then
As
you
you're
have
doing your
Star.
planning.
So I
then-
think I think it's important for me. So if we have growth, we could have a phase 2 building there.
We certainly could.
Absolutely.
All right, that makes sense.
Certainly could.
And then if we have continued decline, and we have to close another elementary, then that site could become a pre-K through 4 or a K through 8 or whatever we wanted to do with it.
It could. There's flexibility built into the recommendation. There's also capacity built into the recommendation. If you recall, not one of the buildings are we suggesting, with the exception maybe of Charles, are we suggesting more than 90% use. We're still holding them below 90%, so there is an option for growth without disrupting the integrity of the plan.
So then, what would our intermediate schools, what capacity would they be? Would they be below that 90% also?
No, I was only talking about the elementary buildings.
Okay. So have we transitioned now to Hibbard?
No, I thought we haven't done school closures yet, have we?
Well, we don't have to go in the order.
Don't have to
We
go in
just
the
want to
order.
make sure we cover
Okay.
those areas, and since we sort of did transition on to Hibbard.
We'll go to Hibbard? Okay.
Go ahead and go to Hibbard.
Well, there isn't a chart for out-of-the-box questions, so.
General.
General.
Is that general? Well, it's about Hibbard, though.
But
so.
he's projecting the capacity just at test to be 88% and 77% at Dennis.
With the new rooms?
With the
new configuration,
the
if
new
it
configuration.
were happening.
So
But with the new rooms?
Right.
And the new cafeteria?
I don't know that we're
no, I
looking
don't-
at the new rooms.
No, it's not including the new rooms. So
But
Well,
it may
here's-
be looking at a calculation method that
yeah.
needs to be revisited.
So my question is, if we're going to reopen Hibbard, why would we not make it a third intermediate school?
We don't
Remember the question you made about how are we going to grow enrollment?
Marketing.
One of the ways that we talked about growing enrollment was to create a product or to create an offering for parents that they wouldn't find anywhere else. And that's what this does at Hibbard. It does relieve some of the pressure on capacity at the two buildings, the two at Test and at Dennis. But bringing those programs together, the way they're being brought together, and allowing us to work with those staffs to combine to form some of these programs that are not offered anywhere else, that's one of our marketing tools.
Will there be fifth graders there? Is that what you're asking?
There
Will there
would
be
be.
fifth graders there? There will
Yes.
be fifth graders, so it will be an intermediate special program. It
Yes.
just won't be a separate.
Well, you need to convince me of that, because I see the programs you're talking about, early college and Logos,
and life skills.
as specialized programs. And so I need numbers, like, I mean, there are specific criteria that a child has to have in order to get in either one of those programs. And so, so I'm just asking the question, could we not develop our intermediate schools into programs that people want to be involved in also? I was just thinking, if indeed
Can't we do both?
space is an issue, if indeed, and maybe it's not, I'm making an assumption here, that could we not take some relief off of our other middle schools by creating a third intermediate school? Just an
No, I think
out-of-the-box?
it's a
Question.
great question, and we did consider that when we were going through all the different deliberations, and the idea was to try to create a product that would appeal to people who are looking at the Richmond Community Schools to determine what does it offer that we can't get anywhere else. But
But what if my child doesn't fit in either one of those programs? then what am I going to do?
Well,
You
we
go to
have
one of the
quality
excellent
services in the other buildings.
But I think her point, it goes back to what Suzanne was saying about the elementary, or about the grade configuration, and that is each of our schools has to have a character, a focus, a something that is identifiably unique about it that would allow people to choose it, even if my child isn't academically eligible for either early college or Logos, but I want a performing arts school or I want an international baccalaureate, then I think we have to have that kind of a focus in our other schools.
So Dennis could be focused on early college. Tess could be
Long-range
focused on
planning.
Logos, and our third intermediate could be focused on maybe the wellness, with the pool or with the arts or what. I'm thinking.
Well, but I don't want to lose that concept. I think we can't lose that concept about a unique identity and focus for each of the school buildings, whether it's exactly.
Okay. I think that has to come, you can't just arbitrarily decide that's the way it's going to be for next
Correct.
year. I think the staff, the people in the building, that has to evolve. And they have to own it or it'll never work.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have to own it.
Okay, while we're looking at Hibbard for high ability programs, and some of these comments come from the letters I've received and talked to other parents, we also need to remember our programs for our lower ability students, since we have one, it might be less than 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 5 now, with IEPs. And I had a lot of questions from parents who have life skills children about how that's going to work. Are there children that are going to be over at Hibbard with the early college and the Logos students? Is that the least restrictive environment for them? That was one big question. Are they going to be staying at Hibbard the whole day, or will they be bused back and forth from their home school to Hibbard? And another question was, how are you going to develop the curriculum to include Logos with the early college kids? I don't expect you to answer all of those, but I want to get those out on the table so that the parents get their answers.
And my question would be, is there an assumption that life skills students can't interact in their best interest with high ability students?
I think there are a lot of unknowns, like the question about life skills students being bused back and forth. Structure is so important to a lot of those kids, and so we need to make sure that we take that into account.
The assumption was not that we would be transporting them back and forth through the day.
Okay.
Their classrooms would be in that building.
But I think that the question would that be the least restrictive environment for those students? Would a Logo setting be the least restrictive environment? Or is the least restrictive environment perhaps a resource room that is available at Test? A special education resource room might be the least restrictive
And I don't know the
environment.
numbers that we have, whether that's even possible, but is it possible to keep them in their home schools at the intermediate level?
In the intermediate level, it would not be. I mean, we need that space.
Okay.
They could have the specials like PE, art, and music. I don't see an issue with that. But if it was something else in their IEPs, I don't understand how that's going to work.
Well, and there have been questions from folks, will we have a critical mass of students there to have a separate music and art teacher, because they have access to that at Dennis and Test, especially music, I think, from what I talked
We
to.
would be working to make sure they have that.
Some of that kind of thing. And are we talking about in Hibbard with this reorganization, we're not talking about morphing early college into Logos and vice versa. The Logos character of project-based would still be, and the early college with the cohort, that would still be pretty much the same philosophy, right? But there would be some interaction?
There would be
What's the-
some. There would be some natural interaction, but there would also be unique features of each that should be maintained.
Right.
One offers Chinese, the other one offers French. So why couldn't we be offering some of the same to both?
Right.
Some projects are going to be nice projects to bring all the students together on.
I think those
Others
kind of
won't.
points, the advantages, we need to hear all those. The public needs to hear that. I think it could be a great marketing tool, as well as, when you're talking about programs for the lower ability students, we do a great job with our kids with special needs. I mean, that could be in our marketing also.
Sure.
Kelly?
Suzanne?
One of the comments that I read somewhere was that there was, I think, some confusion about early college going to be at Hibbard. They were concerned that their ninth grader would be at Hibbard. Did you see that one?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's not the case.
That isn't changing. You're not changing the number of grades that are in. It's still going to be that intermediate level early college. And then when they advance to the high school, they'll be in the high school
That's
version
right.
of early college.
And you know what? We should probably transition our terminology, too. Now
Yeah.
that we have a cohort at the high school, early college is technically a high school term.
Right.
The early college preparatory academy, which we have, is what we have had at Dennis. And they're really not to be confused. And our terminology that we've been using led, I think, to that parent's confusion. Once we explained that when they go from the 8th grade into the high school, that's
when
truly
they're
a high
actually
school
in early
program.
college.
That's when they go into early
Prepping.
college.
They're prepping for it before that.
Right.
Okay.
And some of the most interesting conversations I've had with kids, because I've tried to have a lot of conversations with kids as we've gone through this process, was from an early college young person who said it would be, after 3 years of being with the same 29 to 30 kids, he or she got kind of tired of looking at those. It'd be kind of nice to talk to somebody else, wouldn't it, who had the same abilities, interests, and expectations for education. And I thought that was a very insightful comment to make, that and let's be frank, some of our concerns early on were the whole balance of socioeconomic status and all of those kind of things. And early college says those kids are first generation, and they are eligible for 21st century scholars, and not all the Logos kids would be part of that. And so it's a natural way, using academics and intellectual pursuits, to bring groups of people together. That's what excites me about the possibility, and those kids at that age are usually open to that. And so this young person thought that'd be kind of cool to talk to somebody other than that. Isn't that, I thought, interesting?
Linda, did you have something you wanted to say?
Back to life skills, I have a question that I would like for you to prepare for at some point. I guess I need to know, how will, speaking of life skills, how will this new setting be better for our life skills students?
That's a good question.
And would you explain to the public which the life skills are? It is not every person with an IEP who's considered a life skills. And that is hard for me fully to explain to people exactly what is a life skills.
Mrs. Bergdahl, would you like to explain what the difference is between a life skills designation and just general special ed?
Right. It used to be students who had the lowest IQs, supposedly, sometimes between below 65 or so. But now it's really defined that the life skills students do study a life skills curriculum. It's a different curriculum than that's what's studied, as far as first grade or middle school or high school. And it's really getting them prepared to be adults and be prepared to, live either in a group setting or independently, go out and have a work-related life, that they can be a productive citizen. So the curriculum that's studied is really still generated academically on some levels. Some of them are able to do some academics, but basically it's really to look at the life skills that they're going to be able to learn and be productive.
How many life skills students do we have? Approximately.
Out at Highland at this time, our four classes we have out there are about 27 students.
And those are all the elementary?
Those are the elementary students.
But we're talking at Hibbard, the intermediate, correct?
But some of those at Highland will be
there
there.
would be,
They would be.
Yeah.
There would be one class from the Highland group that would move toward the Hibbard
And the rest
building
would go to
because it's
Crestdale.
kind of the 5th and 6th
So we're
grade
talking
level.
a total of 10 students at the Hibbard building then?
Oh, no.
No, because the test students.
How many 7th and 8th graders do we have?
I was there today, and I think they have about 18 students.
At test?
Oh, in the life skills
Two
program, right.
classrooms.
So we're talking 28
It's
to
right,
30.
15 or 16, I believe.
And they do cooking and
So would they
personal
have more?
hygiene and
Yeah, I've seen that. Would they have more space at Hibbard?
I can't say that.
But
for
that's
sure.
that's the question that I think
The whole,
Linda's
They
building,
also-
the whole first floor.
The other piece that they get ready for is when they go out into the community, and they do trips and things out in the community. But then when they get to the high school, they get into the vocational part, and they do the job-related programs. Even within the building at the high school, they have the Red Hot bookstore. They have a garden store in the spring. They do a coffee house, and then Mrs. Crow's programs. The students
Sure.
go out and work in the community.
right.
Do we have, is it considered life skills in the preschool area over at the Early Learning Center? Do we have
We have
what we would consider life skills?
Not,
no.
go ahead, Kathy.
We have self-contained classrooms at the preschool level, but those tend to have a wider variety of student needs in them because they're so young. We have students who might have significant behavioral issues, but
Would they go to Crestdale or would they go to their home?
they would go to, some would go, the kids who are in the self-contained classes would go to Crestdale, but
Okay.
most of them would go to their home schools.
Jeff?
Well, and staying with the Hibbard, I mean, one of the thoughts with the early college and the logos, my initial thought was a little concerned about isolating the programs and that maybe not being able to provide them all the options that are available in their current settings. And one of the other options that I had brainstormed in my head in the beginning, which I've not heard any of us ever talk about, is with those two specialized programs, they are geared, definitely geared academically. And I think one of the questions I had is, since we have such low capacity at the high school, you know, would we be better off to serve those students, you know, in a 7th grade setting or an 8th grade setting if they were academically ready in the 7th grade to take a 10th grade math class? You know, being at the high school setting would be maybe more advantageous to that. Now, that doesn't talk about the social problems.
See, I thought we talked about that and dismissed that.
You had talked to
I
several.
felt
I
like
had-
you took that off the table because
They
you had
talked
it on the
about it.
table.
It was on
We-
the table, yeah.
Well, I don't remember.
We
I don't
were
remember
simply
discussing
listening
that.
to feedback we were getting from parents, and the feedback was very
No.
troubled. So I removed that. That wasn't something I was
But you heard
going-
some from the high school staff as well on that.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
You heard some from the high school staff
Yes, I
as
did.
well.
Yes.
I did hear from some high school staff members who were
But
concerned.
I guess that was, you know, initially one of my thoughts is would, you know, because I'm trying to look at this two ways simultaneously. I'm trying to look at it financially and what's educationally what I think is best for the child. So with that and the capacity at the high school being so low, but we would have to consider something like that. I mean, I kind of like, the more I've thought about it, I kind of like having the specialized programs at Hibbard, because I could see in the future, if we decide to have what we talked about a little bit earlier, a phase 2, and turn that site into a elementary, then we would either have to make that program elementary, either K through 8, to house that program, or we would have to at that point consider moving the early college and Logos to the high school as well. I'm not advocating we do that, but I'm trying to put all of those things in place of what would best suit the child. I mean, the parent's going to have a lot of concern. I understand that, and some parents wouldn't want, especially a 5th grader at the high school. 7th and 8th grader, I think, it would be much more acceptable.
We do send some over there for special classes, don't we?
We do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's still a possibility. It's kind of a
I can see a
case-by-case
K-8 gifted
basis.
and talented school there at some point. I mean, you had another question.
Linda?
Well, in talking with some parents about the Logos being put at the Hibbard, one of the concerns is social, that they feel that they belong at Test. Even though their program is somewhat isolated, still they have opportunities, in the morning and after school to socialize and during lunch and so forth with other students. And also another concern that was brought up was, okay, so we transport these students for sports and for band and but are they really going to feel that they belong? Or are we going to lose some of our students because, which I guess a great many of our Logos students that are at Test are in the orchestra. And so are these programs going to be able to reach these kids if they are away from that environment? And so that's a concern. And we talk about the tween years, and we know that social is very important for these students. And also with sporting, are they going to feel that they belong? It's a lot different being in a place and feeling that you have ownership there compared to being transported on a bus and you're plopped there for, X number of minutes to participate.
I think one thing that we got to remember too, though, is we're still actually talking, 225 students?
Or more.
So,
More, yeah.
I mean, that'll help, I think, with the community. Now, belonging, that's a good question.
Well, of course, and I remember the conversations when we moved Logos from Pleasant View.
I remember those too.
Well, Logos does seem to get bounced around quite a bit. I mean, it has in several, it's been at, 4 different locations?
When they
in
moved
the
to
last-
Test, they didn't want to go there. I remember that.
Yeah, they did not want to go to
Now
Test.
they'll have opportunity to grow, though, won't they? I mean,
It could, yes, it could grow. Actually, we're talking about growth because we're talking about adding one more grade level,
great.
That's
Right.
true.
but sections too.
So what financial impact will that have? I mean, when we're talking about finances, if we're going to grow, then
But that means somebody else reduces, right, in
Right.
terms of numbers. I mean, we're just moving people around. We hope that if
I
we
don't know.
grow enrollment, then they come with money,
Yes.
Right?
Now, that is true.
right?
If
And
we
new-
grow the
new
enrollment,
students
depends
do.
if we grow enrollment or we just
Grow.
move people.
Right.
Some of it
People-
is, and some of it will be new, I
Yeah.
hope.
Well, just
Well, I want to
Questions?
Yeah. The concern I have with school closure and with Hibbard is the merging of cultures and creating an identity for the building. And Logos has a culture, early college has a culture, the life skills has a culture. So that means, what do we do if we adopt this? How do we help those three entities retain their autonomy while still having a culture identity? Does that make sense? An
Their
identity
own
of some
identity.
kind. An identity for the building. I don't want to just feel like they go to the early college over here and the logo's here. There has to be some kind of unifying, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, unifying identity there while still retaining the autonomy of the two programs, or the three programs.
It's going to be a
really.
challenge because you still also want to keep them back connected to their home school. So, yeah, that's definitely going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Do we want to move into, segue into school closures?
Oh, fun.
Did you say that? What kind of questions do we have about the school closures? And concerns, strengths, and weaknesses? Jeff?
The biggest question I have about the school closures is the redistricting lines that goes along
Absolutely.
with that.
Amen.
Redistricting.
I think a couple of times, I think there's been there's a perception out there, I think, that if we close Garrison, all of those students would go to Charles. If we close C.R. Richardson, all of those students would go to Val. If we closed Highland, all of those students would go to, I believe, Crestel.
Fairview.
I could see a large percentage of that happening, but I mean, I don't see how we can make that general statement, adjust our enrollment across all of our buildings, and not have a few major lines of boundary adjustments.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I just don't see how we cannot do that.
Well, and if you take a look at, I've done a little investigating, if you take a look at where an awful lot of Highland students live, they don't live near Highland, they don't live even in the district that might send them to Crestdale, just because they've kind of moved around. The same with Garrison. There are a number of folks who go to Garrison who are closer to CR or even Westview. And so I think you're absolutely right. It has to do that. I've become more convinced that the three schools that have been chosen for closure are more geographically isolated than any other schools we have, and that we can, if the other 6 schools remain open, more kids can walk to those 6 schools than if we kept these 3, including CR. I went to CR and kind of sat at the corner. The traffic on L Street and the fact that it's close proximity to 27 North and South with fair amount of commercial there, more geographically isolates that. The kids there come from the north and the east, not all the way around. So as I was thinking about schools to close, I want us to still have some kids who can walk to school. And so the 6 that are left still do have a fair number who can walk. I don't know whether that's a positive or a negative. I think for me, Elisa, that is a positive from my perspective.
On the school closures, I guess one of my biggest concerns is that we may lose students. So that follows along with a good marketing strategy to make sure that we do show them that we have a great program to offer.
I also want to remind everyone that when we talk about the elementary program that we have now, we don't have students stay in those classrooms throughout the day. We have regrouping that takes place in RTI. That we talk about RTI and throw that term around, but basically what RTI is, that's just what I've called teacher talk for meeting the needs of the students. And sometimes meeting the needs of the students means taking them out of this class for a few minutes of the day and combining them with students who have similar needs, whether that's advanced or remediation. And remember that when we take a look at reformatting these schools, we're creating the critical mass in some of those grade levels where we can more efficiently meet the needs of a greater number of students.
That to me is the magic button in the middle of all this that's sort of uncomfortable about closing it, is that you are compacting the number so that you can be flexible and have the mass to be able to do that and to protect class sizes. What happens, that's how you get classes of 31, is that there's not enough to do 2 classes and there's too many for one. Where if you have enough to have 4, then you have a whole lot more flexibility. So that's that's the silver lining to closing schools. And I know that hurts, especially when it's your own, personal school, but it gives us the opportunity to to protect those class sizes. And we have had issues this year with that.
And that goes straight to one of our parents' questions, too, helps to answer that.
Is there some way the boundary that's drawn today may not help with classroom sizes next year at 1 grade level?
Yeah, that's always going to be,
So, I mean,
How do you make that flexible?
Yeah, we're sitting in an environment that we're putting all these numbers on paper, and we're saying in a perfect world we're going to have 18 students in this class, and this class.
Everybody stays where they are.
But it's not going to happen. I mean, we know that. You know that. So, is there some way that we could draft an idea or a plan that, I'd almost hate to use the word flexible boundaries,
Why not?
but we need to figure out some way, whether it's done through, like we have board policy right
So
now.
we
that
already
talks
have a
about-
policy that.
But we really don't follow the board policy as far
That's the
as
solution.
how we. So maybe at the same time as we go through this process, can we, as we draw these boundary lines, maybe we should at the same time start talking about how do we adjust later if we get a class. I don't want to go through all this changes, go to the community and say we're doing this because we want to make equal class sizes, small student to teacher ratios, and then next year I get a phone call from a parent and we've got 32 kids in a classroom because we haven't turned the valve off on that child coming into the school building. So, I mean, I want to be able, that's part of the reason why we have the overcrowding we have now in some of our school buildings, is because every school building we're worried about a bunch of different things, and rightly so. All the school buildings want maximum enrollment so they're not looked at for closure. We don't want to tell any parent anything bad or negative for fear that they're going to leave the school system. At the same time, we also need to put a plan out there and articulate this that says, look, we've got to put this plan in place for that child to be in his best environment, his or her best environment to grow. And when we get to an upper level, I don't know, 23, 24, 25 students, whatever upper level you want to choose, this kicks in,
Now, if you look at the enrollment of Westview, and that's why we wrote that policy,
Yeah.
you will find that it's worked.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's been to the dissatisfaction of a lot of people, because when they move in across the street from Westview, they wanted to be able to send their children to Westview, only to be told, well, we have this board policy that is that when we're at 90%, we've capped our enrollment, you're going to have to look elsewhere. And we help them look elsewhere.
But the problem really hasn't been with Westview as much as it has been with other school buildings, because right now we have a tremendous amount of students that transfer out of their current school district into another school district. And some of the classrooms, some of the first grade classes, some of those where we've had the high numbers, some of those students in that class aren't from that school district. But we still accept the student into that class knowing that it's going to push it to 31 or knowing it's going to push it to 32. So I guess I want the perfect world. How can we set that up so we turn that valve off?
Well, it's a different world today than it was when we drafted that policy.
Absolutely.
And there's a board edict it's been here for the last few years, and that is grow your enrollment. And so we've attempted to grow our enrollment by not just quickly saying, no, our capacity is only this. We've waited until the beginning of school, and in some cases, we've gone ahead to enroll the children.
The irony is the capacity in terms of rooms have been in a building. I mean, I know the case at Highland, there's room to do that. They just weren't enough students for 2 different classrooms.
Because we don't have, that's right.
And
and that's the numbers I'm talking about, 31, 32, 33. That's
think Aaron was
Well,
trying
one
to
of the
say
things that I would like to see, the bus garage I'm sure would just go up in smoke. But whatever school a student starts at, that they can
Beginning
remain
of the year at
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
at that school for the remainder of the year. It stops the mobility issues, which really is harmful to kids. It can stabilize a little bit enrollment, class size issues, but I also understand that it creates busing nightmares. But kids establish a relationship with a school, and parents establish a relationship with a school, and it's no fault of the parents if they have to move, and some have to move several times. And then that's devastating to the child. So.
Right. Aaron, you had something you wanted to
Well,
say.
unless Linda's comment was going to go in
right
in
ahead.
line with that. Mine, still under school closings. We had a conversation in one of our meetings in regards to Garrison, because with the proposal, Garrison CR and Highland all have some unique opportunities that they present right now as it is. One of those things at Garrison is the cabin, and I've had a lot of conversation with people about that. And we'd had a discussion, what are the potentials for the cabin, not only if we were to accept the proposal and close Garrison, but what would be the future of that? Because there's a teaching aspect that comes with that has been utilized for a number of years, and the possibility and probability of being able to enhance that through all of the remaining schools that we have.
Well, I don't have a specific plan for that. I've heard a lot of nice plans, and I'll just tell you some of the plans. Maybe you've all heard more. One of the plans I heard, one of the first ones, was to return the cabin to its location where it was actually built, which is the CR area, right there in that area where the building is located now. Create an outdoor classroom, actually eliminate the CR building, and have the cabin there as the hub of a whole new outdoor classroom area. It could be dedicated to a number of issues, including athletics, but also history. But we've also had suggestions about it being at Charles, at Crestdale. We've even heard it move to Cope, or have Cope come in, or some agency come in and help us create an outdoor historical classroom area, kind of like Connor Prairie, at its current location, using that Garrison location in a very different way, maybe even without the building there too. So I don't have a suggestion or a recommendation to make to the board, but one of the comments as I was talking to board members today was maybe we need to have a community committee dedicated to the cabin.
Yeah, and that.
Well, this goes in line with what we've talked about for so long, that whatever decision that we make, it's not just for the immediate, but for something which gives us the continual conversation with the community, as you're suggesting, because it's what's going to happen immediately, as well as what's going to become Richmond Community School Corporation for the next 10 or 15 years as well.
I would love to see a committee, and I think that we have many people that would be more than willing to serve and
Find the best place for the cabin.
that would be wonderful.
Should be noted we also have a caboose too.
We have a caboose.
We have a cabin on one end of town and a caboose on the other.
Well, we need two.
My
cabin and caboose.
I fit Heine will fit the caboose, but that's neither here nor there. A little levity this evening. Under school closures, I want to reiterate a couple of things we heard tonight that I have heard over and over and over again, and that is the kids' identity with their school teachers and staff members, and how whatever we do, whichever schools are closed, we need to find a way to help kids celebrate, bring some closure, and move some of that. And whether it's moving teachers with kids, but kids, if they go in different directions, that might not be the case. But I want to make sure that we recognize that this is emotionally difficult. Any school closure is going to be emotionally difficult for kids as well as their parents, et cetera. But I want us to take that into consideration and figure out a way to think about that. And when we when I look at the 6 schools remaining, I don't look at those as they are today. Because the student body is only going to be about half of what's there and half of something else. And so we're having new schools in each of those locations. And even though it might just be words, I think it is important that the staff kind of decide what character we want to have, how are we going to bring all of these kids together, and whether it is we spend some time at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year focusing on building a sense of community and culture in each of those buildings. I think that will be hugely important. And so it's all about kind of closing some buildings but creating the new entity and doing it with some intention and purpose.
Thank you.
Linda?
I want to go back to class size, because I think class size has been one of those areas that has been of great concern to many of our parents and teachers and many people, board members, yes, absolutely. So, you know, I don't know, maybe the board policy has worked and served its time, but what I would like to suggest is that we do some forward thinking about what ifs. So what if we have some classrooms that are above, you know, come fall? So we need to have some already discussion about what we're going to do about that. And just some forward thinking about if this is what happens, if we kind of have a surprise at one building and have more students than we anticipated, then this is these are some ideas of how we'll handle that. And because my contention is that if you're in a classroom of 31, some students can handle that very well, some students can't. Our students have one shot at that particular grade level, and I would hate to think that 1 year out of their 6 years in elementary, that is going to break those students. And so I think that we need some urgency concerning that particular issue.
Dixie, did you have something you wanted to say? I thought you started.
Well, it was kind of tying in with what Linda's talking about too, and Pat, because when I read the voice or the emails and the letters and listened to parent comments, the 3 things that I heard over and over and over is that they wanted high expectations for their kids. I don't care if they're special ed, general ed, Logos, what have you. They want high expectations for their kids. They want a quality education, and they want safety. The Garrison parents and the Highland parents and the CR parents were all adamant about their love of their schools and being supportive of their schools, which I think is a wonderful thing. And it's a shame we can't keep all of our neighborhood schools open. But I think in another letter that we had from a parent where she said that we really need to look at establishing criteria for excellence for all of our schools, which I think is important. All of our schools should be to the level that we can be proud of. And so I think that these 3 things need to be addressed, and possibly that we do need to establish a criteria for excellence.
In every aspect.
In every aspect.
I have one other comment.
And Pat had another comment.
We've had, this always concerns me when we make something of a controversial decision. We have lots of people making statements. How can we engage those people who were very adamantly talking about things how can we keep them concerned and involved in a positive way as we move forward? Is there a way that once the boundaries are established and we can find some parents in a home area who could connect to parents who would be moving in? Can we intentionally help make the transition for parents and keeping them connected in some way? I don't have any answers to that.
Can we do that through the PTO?
Well, building a new culture is what you're
Yeah, I
talking
just,
about.
how could, I want to make sure that those who felt they had a voice now, that they have a voice in the new place. I mean, you know what I mean?
I think it's going
Some
to
involvement.
require leadership from our system that does an excellent job, and I'm saying excellent job, of implementation with whatever we decide to do. The implementation has got to be
Impeccable.
impeccable. It's got to be wonderful.
At all levels of the
At all levels.
Suzanne?
This is a little more on the fringe, but I did have actually 3 or 4 people mention to me they would like to see some sort of plan or understand what happens to the buildings that are vacated too. So I just wanted to get that out because I've heard that from quite a few business type people that say the last thing that we need or we want is buildings in disrepair, falling apart, because that's what's happened in some other cases over the years. And so, and just helping people understand that we have some requirements of us from the state too, and so that's just another piece that we're going to need to communicate out.
Well, and I think that having buildings that are in disrepair or going downhill or whatever, people that were emotionally attached to those buildings, it makes it even harder to go by and to think that, oh my, once that was...
But like I said, we have some requirements of us that we have to keep them on the inventory for a while, and so we just need people to know that, and that we will be maintaining them to a very limited degree. I mean, we just need to communicate that. That has to be part of the plan.
But we have to keep them on inventory for a while if we have no educational
That's correct.
use.
That's right.
And an educational use is of the site, not necessarily the building.
So that's why I was kind of glad to hear you mention possibly that if we're looking at that section of the Hibbert CR, let's raise CR.
Yep.
I'm glad because I don't want it sitting there for 2 or 3 or 4 years. And I agree. I think if we, as I look at the buildings that we could possibly close financially, and I hate to say this, I mean, the public isn't going to like it, but I can understand the buildings that we chose make the most sense financially.
And geographically.
And, so if we take that emotion away from that now and we think about it, and we decide to go forward and we vote and we do this, then I see no reason within a couple months' time that we've already got a plan in place. It's, and we put, because if we don't sell them, then we need to tear them down.
Yep.
So.
If we have a plan in place.
Yeah, we need to start.
Well, and because of the reasons, some of the reasons why those buildings are the ones, because they're would be so expensive to renovate. They're not really the ones to keep around for future growth either. So that's the other part we have to. I mean, again, it's hard to take the emotion out of it, but I do think we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Now, the Baxter building.
I was just going to segue into that. That's next.
Because I think the Baxter building, and I think we also need to talk about, and maybe for the next meeting that information comes back to, is I would like to have a little bit more detail in depth of what we want to keep, our programs that we want to keep, and our CIS, our Centerstones, and the financial impact of those. Because we really don't know, other than we've got a dollar amount, but we really don't know. Do we plan on keeping CIS or propose to keep CIS for?
How many do we propose?
Is it still 40 hours a week, or is it 30 hours a week, or all of those types of supplemental services that we want to wrap around the child? I want to have an understanding what we want to keep. And that goes to the Baxter building as well, because if we're going to create this alternative setting, we're actually picking up some expense because we're moving away from a facility that doesn't really charge us. But, I mean, we still have the building expense is going to be the same, but some of those services, we're going to want to move those into that and maybe enhance that there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Pat, before we go totally to that one, this is kind of a combination of the grade configuration and school closure. I've really tried to articulate good things that can happen for kids because of grade configuration and school closure. And when I think about critical masses that we already talked about, I can also think about, for some of our teachers, the moving arts and music teachers. If they have a critical mass of students, aren't they going to have less movement around? And I also think about consolidation of resources for kids. Think about the enhanced library and technology that we can have aimed at those ages. So I don't want us to lose sight of selling points that we can make as we communicate to the public. I mean, there are some advantages to this that we haven't really talked about, that kids can have more resources of some things. And I want to make that for the communications person over there to be just making your list there for you, Misty.
Okay.
Now, sorry, we can go to
One of the things
backstory.
we've heard about from teachers, principals, parents is behavior. So you have a big plan to help us out with that.
Well, I think it's a substantial addition to what we're doing right now. At the Baxter Building, we talked about moving the operations that currently take place at the state hospital. But that's only one of the suggestions we had. The other part of that recommendation was to expand that program to include an alternative option for students who are having behavior issues in the buildings. And we're not talking about permanent removal of those students. We're talking about getting them some assistance, some counseling services, perhaps through Centerstone, and able to transition them back into their buildings. That's our ultimate goal, is to transition them back to their buildings. It gets them the focused attention they need, and it also provides their teacher to continue to provide the attention that their classmates need. And so this is something that we've heard many times from our teachers, that they're distracted by some of the classroom behavior issues. So this is our way to address those concerns.
Will you be talking to us about a program as far as like the parameters for sending a child over there? And another thing that was brought up, Linda brought it up before, was having, the public needs to know that doesn't mean we send every child who has any kind of a behavioral problem over there. So what would the parameters be, and how are we still going to deal with that problem in the schools, because we'll still have that problem in every school?
Sure. We'll be prepared to talk about that.
Isn't the 6, 7, and 8, will that go under alternative school because the perimeters are already set?
Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry, Dixie.
For grades 6, 7, and 8 at the middle school or intermediate school, whatever we're having, the state already has those perimeters set if it's an alternative school. And you get the money for it.
So will this be considered an alternative school?
Well, sure it will be. The whole state, that whole program that we have for the state hospital is a type of an alternative program.
Mm-hmm. That's why we receive the data only for 6 through 12.
Right.
Yes.
Because some of the data that's coming to us
it's state reports.
Is the K through 12.
State, so what?
Linda? Well, I was just going to say that a strength of this is providing a nice facility
much better
for
environment
the
for
students that are enrolled at the state hospital.
Oh, that's
and you know, it will give them a nice
Outdoor
classrooms,
space.
a gym,
Yep.
a cafeteria,
Library.
a beautiful interior classroom.
light,
Playground.
natural
A better
light.
atmosphere altogether.
Absolutely. Not so oppressive.
Yeah.
And those students deserve to have that kind of environment. So that is the strength there.
Did you have something else, Dixie, you wanted to say? Or
I have a general question that has to do with maybe both Hibbard and Baxter. Can we charter those buildings?
What would be the
I don't
advantage
know.
of that?
I don't know. Back when all of this charter business started happening, school systems were able to convert to charters, and I don't know enough about, because I tried to find the law that says how that has changed. Are there advantages to taking pieces of us and making them charter schools or not?
Well, the advantages have been eliminated. Not that there wouldn't be some advantages, but if you remember when it first was created, charter schools offered opportunities for waivers of a lot of state regulations. Many of those regulations have been waived or eliminated.
For everyone.
For everybody. And so magnet concept, that's why you're seeing so much more in terms of magnet school creation as opposed to the charter. In fact, in almost all the charter school creations, you're chartering so that an outside organization can actually manage the facility.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Well,
Somebody asked me about that.
The other thing, too, I mean, that money would follow the child in a charter, but with an alternative program, you do get additional money. It's not a lot, but it does help
For the
with
extra resources.
that you need to, because they need a lot of those resources.
Good distinction.
More questions on the?
Did you
on
consider
Baxter?
any other, for me, there were a few must-haves when we went into the master planning mode, and one of them was this program. We had to do it. Where it is wasn't as critical for me, other than, obviously, this is going to be a really nice facility. Moving it was one part, but expanding it was the other necessary part. We have some kids who just really need some extra triage, whatever you want to call it, that it's not good to expect that from the school, regular school. So, did you consider anywhere else? I mean, I don't know.
We did.
Okay.
We some of the options had that at Hibbard. Some were at CR. Some, I think, we even considered Vail at one point.
Okay.
And I don't know that we considered the high school, but it seems like we've had that conversation at some point.
The thing that concerns me about this whole is the transition of kids back to their home school and how our programmatic plan helps that, because it doesn't do any good. I mean, when I think about the positive alternatives at the Boys and Girls Club, they have a really good experience and then bam, they go right back into
And
the
teachers
same
have talked about
environment situation that generated the issue in the first
Right.
place. So how do we help kids? So I guess what we're saying, as I think about, the physical isn't as important to me maybe as the continuum of services and support for each child, from identification to what interventions in the school building, then do they need to go somewhere else, and then when they come back, what is the transition
And how
back
do we
into
get
that?
to the core of the problem? I mean,
Exactly.
That's the issue. Yeah.
Well, and I have, and this is my personal opinion, I have problems with kids that come for a while and then go back to the school, because having worked with alternative school kids, it takes time to build trust,
That's true.
to build a relationship, because they're very standoffish and they don't trust you always. So there needs to be a good time frame that they spend with you. And also, often they are lacking a number of skills because of not being in class or down in the office, or behavior issues, or not paying attention, not being able to focus. And it takes time to build all of that. So I would hate to see a quick in and out movement with those kids, because they need stability.
Have we run any numbers on that? Like,
They're supposed to come
speaking
back
of
with some
capacity, okay.
What numbers are you talking about?
For the numbers of students who
That we could accommodate?
we
or
currently
that-
have that are at the state hospital, but then how many could we accommodate
Oh, I see.
at that
Okay.
facility? And has anyone run, like, how many might that be in our current situation? Who might that be? I don't know. I just don't want us to outgrow someplace before we get started.
Well, for the program that we currently operate at the state hospital, it goes anywhere from 40 to 90.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, it does. It
Mhm.
fluctuates
Yeah,
every
sure.
year.
Well, and when I think about alternative, this conversation is about behavior issues, but we also have students for whom alternative teaching and learning methods are important.
That's a good point.
And this isn't a true alternative school. Because when I hear you talk about alternative, Dixie, when you have some of those high school kids, they didn't have behavior issues necessarily. They might have had attendance issues because they didn't like or couldn't connect with what was going on. So I don't know.
It was a mix because we had behavior problems, we had attendance issues, we had high school girls who had children or boys who had children, but we also had gifted students as well.
Who just couldn't make it in the regular classroom or
they
didn't want
needed
to?
a
Or
smaller
didn't fit?
At the high school level, they'll still stay at the high school, though,
We
right?
still have them at the Warner
Still
building,
have
too.
Pardon me?
Oh,
Those
that's
are the
adult ed.
Adult ed is, well, and that's another question.
But we have an alternative program over at our high school, and those kids will stay there.
In our plan, we have not talked about removing that program from where it is or relocating.
Yeah.
That could be talked about in the future after we. Jeff?
Well, then, let's talk about, in order for this to take place, let's talk about the moving of the preschools out into the elementaries. Several of the comments that in the emails came back about, they referred to the support that they had at one location, the OT, the PT. I'm assuming that, Charles is the only school building, the only elementary that I'm a little confused on whether we're going to have pre-K there or not. I'm not sure. I think we're initially proposing all of them to have
The
pre-K.
intent is to have it there. We don't know that we'll have capacity in the first year.
So the way the balancing of the enrollment will determine that. But I guess from a support point of view, with that program, and we put it in every elementary, do we expect to? Will you think we'll get more preschool kids? Because I know in the past,
I think we probably will.
We have a waiting list.
We've had more students make themselves or enroll in their neighborhood schools. I mean, we've all the principals that we've talked to wanted to have a preschool program in their buildings. And that's because they've had questions from parents about what plans are there to provide preschool in the buildings. The other thing that I want to continue to emphasize is that recent research says we need to connect preschool with kindergarten. I realize that for the teachers of the preschool program that we now have, it is a very nice setting to be able to collaborate with one another. No doubt about that. But the research also says that we need to have these connected with kindergarten. That's where you get the biggest bang for the buck. And we would, I suppose, for collaboration purposes, it would be nice to have all the second grade teachers together in the school corporation, or all the fourth grade teachers. That would be nice. But the best arrangement is to have them connected to some other grades,
For the
where there can
child.
be some cross-grade collaboration too. So, for the child, yeah. And so you have to leave something in order to get something else. And while I'd like to keep together what we have in that early learning center, because there are some excellent features to that, you can't get that. You can't get what we're trying to propose without moving away from that model. So I don't know that in fact, I know the research wasn't out there when we did that model back in 2003-04.
Yeah.
Wasn't out there, but it is now. It was just released this last fall. And so that's why we're so enthusiastic about that
so
model.
we feel fairly certain then that with our existing or maybe modified services to support the preschool students, we'll be able to do that in each of the buildings.
Well,
That would be the intention.
Jeff, I have a question based on what you were saying. You were saying OT and PT, occupational therapist and physical therapist. Do those only fit the special needs preschool kids? Are there just certain, would they go to Crestdale and be?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on how the service they provide. I mean, because if they are determined to have special needs, then they have an IEP at preschool level.
Right.
So,
But I didn't know whether the OT and PT only service those.
They
No,
don't.
they serve everybody.
But they're based in that building,
They're
right?
based in that building, but they serve other students, don't they? Everybody in the district.
Right,
So,
right.
so they're okay.
Did
But
you
I
say
also think-
modifying? Did you,
Me?
Jeff, did you say modifying the services of preschool?
well, what I meant is modifying it or adding in existing services if we needed at the individual elementaries. I mean, if just making sure that they have the support at the building level that they need to have a successful preschool program.
Because they
Well,
travel now.
I think if we're looking at, if this plan is going to help us improve what we do, I think preschool, we know how crucial
Yes.
it is for reading readiness for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. And I think we need to look at it again as all week and not the 2-3 day, I don't
Especially
know.
for 4-year-olds.
But I do think we need to revisit
Yeah, how you
possibly what
implement
we're
them.
doing and improve what we're doing for that reading readiness.
Now, we don't get paid for preschool,
No.
correct?
We don't get
For
We don't
the-
get-
for
I was gonna say we didn't
the,
get paid for it.
Special needs,
Yeah.
special education we receive.
And Jeff's comment, I mean, we made the full day kindergarten decision knowing we wouldn't be paid for full day kindergarten, but because of what Dixie was just saying, that it was educationally.
But we don't have that luxury, really, right now.
Well, but
preschool program and I'm confused because I know we get some donations and there's other things, and I know we get money from the state for the special. But do we charge?
Yes.
We charge the parents for preschool now
On a
We charge
slate.
that are in general
nominal fee.
education.
Nominal.
But we don't charge families who are eligible for free or reduced price lunch.
And will that be the same as we move it out into
Well, we
the
have to-
program? I mean, are we going out saying
That's a
this
good
is-
question.
Well,
Are we going out to the community saying, we want all the 3-year-olds in school so we can teach them to read? Is it free, or do we charge them $5 a week? Or, I mean, what is our...
Well, and we have to determine about busing also. Are we going to bus our preschool children?
Well, and in the past, we've also established a non-competition with some of the other providers. So to go out and say we want all the
No.
students at that grade, at that age level, we haven't done that in the past.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
if
I
we
wasn't
focused
thinking
on
about it from a
4-year-olds?
competition point of view. I was thinking about it from the student's point of view.
That's a good question. I don't have a response for you tonight.
Well,
I missed a good question. What was it?
I said,
4-year-olds.
what if we focus on 4-year-olds?
Okay.
And also talking about our competition, you know, one of the things that happens now is that some of our children go to our preschool and then they also go to another preschool in
That's
the
true.
afternoon. And so that's benefiting them tremendously.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I have a facilities question about the Baxter Building because Birth to 5 is living there now with us, and I think that has been a pretty good relationship, and we've benefited from them being there. Do we have a place in mind for them?
Don't have a place right now, but we have talked to their leadership, and we've
Okay.
told them that we would work with them, and if we have some opportunity to help them relocate within our facilities, we'll do that.
Okay.
We've talked a little bit about numbers, and you talked about them at the meeting on the 14th of December as far as construction and so forth. Is all that information available on the website for, I've been getting some letters from parents talking about cost and timing of construction, operating expensive, administrative expenses, and so forth. Is all that available on the website? Because I think you gave us that information.
I'm pretty sure if if the people who are interested would go to our site and check, I'm just looking, see if that's think it
I
might
mean, the
be.
numbers beyond what's in the master plan proposal?
Let's see. Assumption statement, current capacity, estimated construction cost, Appendix G. I mean, they have to know where to look, and we'll be able to tell them where to look.
And while you're
It's
doing...
right here, I think.
It is Appendix G, estimated construction costs, and we have that broken down per building.
On the website.
Uh-huh.
Great.
We also have, in the editorial today, there was a question, why haven't we seen reduction in administration?
Oh, and teachers.
I suppose we
said.
can also tell them where to look, but it's in there too. We're talking about reduction of administration. We're talking about reduction of a number of employee groups,
Right.
including teaching. The question was, why hasn't that superintendent told everyone that we are going to see some position reductions? Well, we
have been.
are, but there's also something called attrition. Maybe we need to define that. Attrition occurs when there are resignations and retirements, and that makes it possible to reduce your staff without actually putting anyone through a reduction in force procedure. And we would hope, though we can't guarantee, we would hope that we have no reason to reduce any particular staff member. I've explained repeatedly that over the past 3 years we've had over 20-some positions that have been where we've had teachers resign or retire. That's enabled us to avoid reduction in force.
Would you define staff position, though? Are you talking just teachers, or are you talking?
I'm talking just teachers right now.
Okay, well, I think that maybe
Just teachers. And but we can't guarantee. I've also explained that if we have 6 teachers from the high school in the English department resign or retire, we have to
still have to have an English
replace
teacher.
many of them. So we don't capture our attrition opportunities there. It has to be kind of across the board, and that's what we've had the past several years.
Mr. Coddington wanted to add on to that.
Yes, to go along with Dr. Boroff, Appendix I was by position and the cost savings that we will garner, and a spreadsheet that we've already developed to say, if this is approved, this is what we've committed to. Has it happened? And if not, why hasn't it happened? So we can hit the number that we promised the board that we can do. Now, if we don't hit the number, we'll be able to tell you because we hired these 3 positions over and above, and we did this, and we didn't do this, and we added more here. I will be able to identify why did we hit the number, and if not, what made us not hit the number that we're looking for to balance the budget.
Okay, I have a general question that when I think about a master plan, I think about a master plan with strategies and action steps and so on and so forth. So far, what we've talked about is basically pre-K 8. And I don't want anybody to think that the high school is not in our sights for enhancement or whatever it is, because I'm really concerned about how this all flows into the high school and what happens when they get to the high school if we have some of these interesting, creative, innovative programs, et cetera. So not that we have to have that question answered before I am willing to vote on the basic framework that you've presented, but I don't want us to think that the high school is not a vital part of this planning process. It may be next phase, it may be next year, whatever.
There are additional changes that need to take place at the high school in
Yes, there are.
in complementary manner to some of the changes taking place at the high school. I mean, Joanna Fox has contacted me.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
That's a name some of you haven't heard for a while, but from Johns Hopkins. She contacted us and said that she would like to have an update on Richmond High School for an update of the Grad Nation report. And in my response to her, I told her that we're moving more and more towards the early college model. And that's a pretty significant move. But in the time that she and I have been working together, we've also finally implemented our full Project Lead the Way curriculum. And we're also looking at some redesigns of our counseling services. to complement, again, the early
Good.
college model. And Mrs. Wolpe is prepared to talk about that in the next several weeks with the board. So there are a lot of changes taking place at the high school, but once the K-8, pre-K-8 has been taken care of, we do have some issues at the high school.
Linda.
I want to go back to growing enrollment. And I guess I want us to think about our competition out there, and whether it be a private school or whether it be another public school. And, you know, people might go to another school based on a special program, but I have a feeling that more than not, they go to another school for various other reasons that I think we need to be thinking about, whether it be the way they're treated or whether it be because of safety or, you know, or whatever. And so maybe daycare. And I don't know whether you all have thought about daycare, but I've heard a lot of parents that are concerned about the daycare of their kids.
Before and after school.
And
before and after school.
Exactly. And so I just want us to think about how we can grow enrollment by working on the way we treat people, the culture that is created in our schools, and it may be a special program, but I have a feeling that oftentimes it's not. And I would appreciate any insight into, you know, what we know about why people choose a different school than Richmond Community Schools, and look at it from that aspect.
We also contacted the people this year who did not come back, correct, and found out reasons. So
We had various, I can't address all the different reasons, but we did have a number of parents willingly provide that kind of information for us.
You know, there was a headline this week that generated interest from parents and said, "Why doesn't Richmond drug test?"
we
Remember
talked
that
about
conversation
Yeah,
we
that
had 2 or
didn't-
3 years ago
yeah.
about that?
We started
Was
out.
you on the board by then? I mean, we talked about it. We went to lots of National School Board Association sessions about that. So there are, I mean, you're absolutely right. There are lots of different reasons.
Okay, we've had a lot of really thoughtful conversation and tried to answer a lot of the questions that the public might have and questions that we have. Are there any more general questions that you would like
I
to
just
talk
have a general
about?
statement that I've heard from, again, it's, I don't know why, but I seem to have sort of a certain type of people that talk to me. And what I've heard from a lot are if we feel strongly about the recommendation, they feel like we should just get on with it. Don't take too long. I know that rush issue came up, but I've had several people say, get the infrastructure or the structure voted for, so the framework voted for, so that they can get to the details. And I've heard that from enough people. I feel like I needed to share it. So
Well,
I
along
agree.
with that, we have so many questions tonight that I'm thinking we might want to have another work session other than the board meeting next week, because I know between now and then we're going to hear a lot more from the public, and we're going to go home tonight and think about this and think about a lot more questions. So what's the best way for us to get our questions to you? Should we just email them? And when do you think you'll be ready to answer this conversation?
I have a few questions up here. This
Well-
is going to keep us busy for at least a couple hours.
Well, here's a question. Here's a question for us as a board, and maybe this helps you. Which of these questions that we framed tonight have to be answered in your mind before you can vote for what Suzanne just said, the basic framework?
And what is the basic framework?
And is the basic framework those 4 pieces: grade configuration, school closure, the Hibbard concept, and the Baxter concept? I mean, I don't know the answer to that. That's a question for all of us as board members. Which of these other questions have to be, because the boundary question.
Has to be answered for me.
Before?
How are you going to do that?
So.
How do you do that? Yeah.
I think we have to have a general idea where the boundary is.
Oh, okay. I can live with that.
You already have that.
Yeah, I can live with that.
Well, and why don't we, as individual board members, write the questions that we have to have answered and send them to Kelly?
I think that's a good.
Well, now.
Are there
okay,
more than what we've already given
I was going
us?
to say,
Yeah.
if that's the case, do we disregard everything that's up here until we hear from
Are you
them?
saying you have a lot more questions?
Well, no, but I mean, each board member are going to have, each one of us are going, every one of us probably are up there. You know, each of us are going to have certain things that we're going to want to have, you know, the financial piece of it, the revised financial, and a more detailed.
I don't think we need to ask again. I think we just did ask, didn't we?
Well,
it will be done.
But I guess what I'm saying is to be assured that we get that information. As long as they captured it all, I'm fine with that.
Well, I'm going to get a copy of the meeting and go back over it again. Now, one thing I wanted to this will be on the website, this meeting, correct? So the public can watch it, because we weren't televised tonight.
No, but it was recorded.
Okay.
Will it be on WCTV?
That I don't know. If we want it to be.
They are, the students would be 2 weeks.
Oh, so
Their programming is currently, I mean, they're doing a lot of maintenance and changes and training for staff, so they're not doing any programming right now.
Can we make this available
website.
on our website? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
we need Brian to tell the public that.
Dixie wanted to say something.
Well,
also.
I mean, after I looked at all the questions I had written down and everything, just summarizing, I guess, is the master plan has to be the framework to make meaningful change in improving our programs, our services, our operations, our budget. It has to lead us to higher performance and student achievement, as well as teaching and learning. It has to be guided by criteria for excellence in our school district. That includes our vision, our annual goals, and it also has to include criteria for being an excellent school system that's going to attract our customer base. And I just want to make sure that what we have here is going to make this happen.
See, I don't think this is going to make it happen. I think it's going to allow it to happen.
Well,
but
allow
I think
it
it's
to happen.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's the
I
teachers.
think that
and-
is a great summary.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know. I just feel that before I can determine when the right time to vote is, I have to have these questions.
That's why I was suggesting another work session, because I think we have a lot more conversation to have than can be done in a regular board meeting before we vote. That would give us another board meeting plus another work session, plus that would allow the public to speak
When are
twice.
you thinking about doing this? Because, I mean, if we
Well-
go by week, you know, in a week after our next board meeting,
I was
then all of a
actually
sudden we're
thinking
dragging it
before
again.
the next board meeting, if you think
Okay.
that's possible.
I mean, honestly, for our very first time at this, I mean, I think that that we brought up a lot of viable questions, and I think we did pretty good.
I think you did too.
Well, I too think that at the next meeting, I mean, we've asked the questions, now we need to hear response.
Can we do that before the next board
That's
meeting?
the thing.
or-
Do they have enough time?
If you tell us you would like a meeting next Monday or Tuesday, we can be ready.
Well, I don't want to, I mean, we can wait till after the next meeting. I just would like to,
Let me tell you,
move it along.
The sooner the better. If you can be assured.
Okay.
I mean, if we lose opportunity. I mean, Mr. Slifer asked about, are we going to be ready in the fall? Well, every week that we don't make this decision is just one more week. It's going to rob us of being ready for the
Well, I
fall.
would like to have one then, if possible, next Monday night or next Tuesday night, and, I mean.
Do you have a city council meeting next Monday night?
can't revolve around her.
It wasn't for her.
Something happening
It was-
that night related to that.
Does anybody else have anything going on next Monday night?
I don't
Aaron
have
does.
anything.
Yes, I do.
Aaron does.
Tuesday night. You aren't golfing on Tuesday night, are you? This winter.
I am Saturday.
Well, what do we think about Tuesday night then?
What's the date?
10th.
The 10th?
Well, why don't we have a regular board meeting scheduled for Wednesday? Well, I mean, why
Right.
don't we just do it Wednesday?
I think, because I don't think we can.
Thinks we need
Because you should
both.
see the agenda for.
Yeah, we still
Wednesday.
have an agenda we have to reorganize at our next board meeting, and
The reorganization won't take long.
I
mean,
think this
our next
deserves
meeting
a
is-
separate session.
But the next meeting is them responding to us.
Right.
I mean, it's not for us to interact back with them.
But we're still going to need another meeting beyond that, I think, before we're ready to make up our minds.
I'm okay.
If we have their information on the 10th, and then on the 11th, when we have master planning as part of the work session, we can get all of this hashed out.
Be a deeper discussion.
Yeah.
And then be
Well,
ready
and
to
I w-
possibly make a decision.
I want to make sure that we give Dr. Borf and his staff an appropriate amount of time to reflect, because, just as so many of the public have given us some really thoughtful suggestions, I mean, that has changed my thinking. And I would hope that we would make this plan, that this plan would be made better through the questions and the conversations that we have had tonight, and that, not that I want change just for change's sake, but I would hope that through this almost 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours of conversation, that some of it would would change some thinking and
answer some concerns.
Not better, clearer.
Kelly, if you
And-
have to schedule it for next Monday, go ahead. I'll see if I can adjust. I'm
I don't have to
supposed be
schedule it for,
instructing
I don't
before
have a
me
preference.
Monday.
Could you do Tuesday?
Tuesday may be able to work too. I'm supposed to be instructing in Fort Wayne Monday and Tuesday.
Monday and Tuesday?
Yeah.
we'll write you a
A pass.
I just want to make sure that when your response is whatever you guys decide to have a meeting, just let me know. But I would like to really spend some time talking about the programs, the stuff, the support services that we're going to put in place after the plan. And to me, that's part of the detail.
Does that have to come before you vote? Do you
Well,
think?
it does to me, because I
don't think
want
it
to see
can.
some kind of response on, we're wanting to collect X dollars so we could keep these wraparound services. I want to understand, what wraparound service are we keeping? How are we going to keep what's the CIS going to look like? What's the corners going to look like?
May I answer that?
Yeah, we talked about that.
May I answer that, or you want me to wait till we?
You have prepared a sustainability report,
Oh,
which
okay.
could be a part of this conversation.
Okay.
So,
And we did talk about that at some point.
Yes.
How many dollars we were going to keep and what it was going to be used for, correct?
but we may need to revisit that, and that's not a problem.
Does that answer that piece of it, if we revisit that?
That's fine.
Okay.
We're talking about, we're wanting to make the decision as soon as possible, and I appreciate that. But I also don't want to walk away from this meeting and not have, I want to make sure that we get the answers to the questions or concerns that we have. So I don't want to move so quick that we,
I'm just concerned, and I do understand what you're saying. I'm concerned that we get so gummed up in wanting to know every detail that we delay getting the structure in place so that they can do the detail. That's where I'm kind of coming from. So I'm a little troubled.
Well, and I'm
just worried about that.
I'm a little concerned about what is our role. Which decisions do we have to make? I mean,
Right.
what do we make a decision about where administrators go, where teachers go, all of those kind
Yeah,
of things?
that's
No,
not
we
us.
stay out
Yeah.
of that. What is the board's responsibility? What is the decision?
Well, I want everyone to feel comfortable about voting. That's the thing. I mean, everyone has to have what they need to be able to make a vote. So I definitely want that. I just want to make sure we're not expecting to know everything before we vote. Because we want the teachers to do that. We want them to come up with some things. We want the people who are going to be in the buildings to do that.
Stakeholders.
And yeah, we want to give them the permission to go forward and do that at some point. That's all.
well, just to reiterate, detail, I don't want to get down into the weeds, but we
There
are
is some.
doing this to recoup money
Yep.
for CIS. I want to know what our CIS program is going to look like. I mean, that's,
That's a fair,
you know,
I get that.
we're going to have 1.5 CIS persons at each school, or we're going to have 40 hours, or we're going to have a center. That's all the detail I need.
Right.
I mean,
Well, and Mark and Kathy said that they had gone to the principals, and you were going to get back with us on what they felt the schools needed.
That was Bob and Missy.
Yeah, okay.
That's in sustainability.
because our job would then,
You
our
all look
job
alike
is
after
to
a
make
while.
sure that we allocate the funds to support.
Right.
That's where.
Don't forget our walkthrough.
Yes, our walkthrough field trip.
And make
Visual
sure that
learner.
Richmond State, I'd like to make sure that Richmond State Hospital is included on that too.
You haven't been there?
It's been several years.
We're closing it, though. We don't.
Yeah, we were going to go through and see what the new buildings look like, correct?
So
Get an
are you
idea.
wanting to look at a Monday or a Tuesday?
Yes.
We'll need to advertise.
Will
that.
Tuesday work better for you?
Probably, maybe, yes, it'll have to.
Okay, Tuesday at 5:30. Again, I thought the time worked well. We can have public commentary first, so we have that fresh in our minds as we have our discussion. Are there any other comments and questions before I ring the bell?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, yes. Thank you, everyone.